and your story having worked for the UN, you were basically pretty much vaccinated against going too deeply into the bowels of the UN because you had already started in your journey in reading truth and economics. So, but it just seems to me that some people they join the globalist system, they get all the perks, the tax free and whatever, all the nice little privileges they get, and then they fall for it hook, line, and sinker, and they just love the benefits. But some people, they have this discomfort with it, like you and I, and it just doesn't sit right. And but we don't, instead of turning away from that pain, we turn into it and try to ask, why is this? Why don't I feel right with this? And then all of a sudden, everything changes. And then even if your life gets more difficult, you're still more at peace with yourself. Hey guys, Rafa here from the Endgame Investor, and in our continuing series of the people inside the gold and silver movements, today we have Claudio Grass, a Swiss guy who I met fortuitously, who just contacted me when I was running in a political movement for a man named Moshe Feiglin, and Claudio wanted to support me in my run for Israeli parliament on that list, and we became friends since then. Claudio sells gold and silver in Europe, and I'll tell you all about that. Claudio, how are you doing?
Ravi, first of all, pleasure seeing you again. You know, I'm doing fine. I mean, besides the madness of the crowd, of course, but otherwise, all okay.
Yeah. I guess I'm okay too. It depends on the day. In general, I'm okay. Like my core is very stable. My core is stable, but like the sine graph inside that core is it depends on who I run into, how crazy people are that day, whether the police are around enforcing whatever regulations they're enforcing, and you can guess what I'm talking about. So Claudio, um, I'm just going to start with the general observation, and I'll let you kick off on that. We were discussing before we started recording on the fakeness of society now, and just the way people are acting, and the walking dead versus the living people. And it seems to me, how this relates to the gold and silver movement, that it's a repeating pattern. Whenever you get a serious escalation of the inflation of the money supply, or inflation of money, it inflates absolutely everything, all the way down to the actual culture of the country that is doing the inflating. We saw it in Weimar, where the Germans became inflated and they went crazy. We're seeing it all over the world now, because the world is going crazy and everyone is inflating. And the late Roman Empire, the emperors got crazier and crazier, and their inflation got worse and worse. Everything is inflating. Academia, culture, respect for people is only it's fake respect. You have this woke culture that has sort of like equality, but it's only fake equality. Everything is fake. And it goes down to money, because paper money is a money representation, and the more you inflate it, the faker the money is. And really, when it comes down to it, the gold and silver investment, or the gold and silver hard money community, sees the core, at least I see the core of all these problems in money itself. And when none of this can be funded anymore, all the fakeness has to go away, because there's no time to waste, because you got to make a real living with real money. Those are just my observations. How do you see it? How did you get into the gold and silver? How did it click with you? How long have you been at this game, and what exactly do you do?
All right. Well, I think everything started around 2000. When we had the first dot-com bubble, and we had 9/11 coming together, and then we had Greenspan opening up, all the doors to inject as much liquidity as possible. And I had some friends of mine, working for banks surrounding me, saying, yeah, Greenspan is a great guy. And so everyone was repeating what Greenspan was saying. And at that moment in time, I basically realized, hey, I have no clue. I have no clue what's going on. I don't understand the world I'm in. And that was basically the start of my journey, trying to just find out the world, reading more about history, trying to find an economic school which made sense. So I basically took I mean, I was reading a book from Ferdinand Lips. The name was Gold Wars. So it was about monetary history, also about the Swiss National Bank when they sold their gold reserves and so on. That was the first time that I was reading a book which basically made sense in a way. And so I started a communication with Ferdinand Lips. And so he pointed me out to the Austrian School of Economics. He told me, read Röpke, read Hayek, Mises. And that was back in 2004, during my days when I was still working for the United Nations back then in the Middle East, in Israel and in Syria.
Oh, so you're like a
so that combination,
the UN, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I was always in business. I was an airline manager, basically. Had a good career between my 20s and 30s. And then with 30, when we had 9/11 and all that stuff, I also made, I had a dispute with one of my bosses at Continental. So I did not agree with what he was doing. And so basically, yeah, we separated. And then I got married, I got married, I got children. So everything changed. I was not any longer only responsible for myself. I had to take care of a wife and one child at the beginning. So that really changed a lot. And at the same time, I realized, okay, I'm 30 now. What I'm going to do the next 30 years, in a world that I don't understand. And so that was really the beginning of the journey. And as a consequence, of course, back then, because I was so confused, I thought, okay, politics are the good guys, all the managers are the bad guys. We had Enron, MCI, Swissair, I mean, all the big scandals. And so the impression I got, from all these mass media, mainstream bullshit papers, of course, I thought, yeah, politics are the good guys. And I was always a big supporter of the United Nations because I'm a Swiss military militia officer. And so I thought, why don't, let's take the opportunity and do something good. Let's work for the United Nations, the great organization who wants to bring peace to the rest of the world and so on. And as a consequence, I was then based out in the Middle East, taking care of taking care of the liaison between the Syrian authorities and the United Nations. And during these 2 years, I basically had to deal with all the ambassadors and defense attachés. And there I just learned a tremendous amount of, in real life, dealing with all these politicians and diplomats and military guys, and also had to check out, how the UN is functioning and working. And I was completely disillusioned of the 2 years, of course. It was a great time. I mean, it's always nice, to have an expat contract working for the UN. You don't have to pay taxes. You get all these nice benefits and goodies, paid by the taxpayers, of course.
Right.
So yeah, then you are in that branch. We have two classes of people these days. Some are living off tax money, and others have to pay taxes. So back then, I was on the side of the guys being funded by tax money. And in these 2 years, I just realized, this is not. I mean, with all these books and then starting the classic liberal thinkers, the Austrian School of Economics, more history, which is not, taught at the school, for example.
Wait, Claudio, one second. So you're saying, just so I get the order of the story correctly, you got into Austrian economics before you started working for the UN, and then you worked at the UN, and then you saw some kind of like a dissonance between what you were reading and who you were working for. Is that how it went?
Yeah, basically, I mean, I took the book who really was the kickoff for my journey. I was reading that stuff in my 3rd week in the Middle East, when I was based out in Israel, and so afterwards I just started, the conversation with Ferdinand Lips, and then I was reading. It took me 6 months to become a classic liberal, or maybe 3 or 4 months, because I was ordering all these books and then just reading. And of course, you have always a lot of time when you're working for the government, So I was reading as much as I could. And then of course, I had, then I knew I have to go back to the private economy. The private economy is the good one. I understood what really free markets are. And I also realized that we are not living in a free market society or in a capitalistic system. That was already back then, already highly orchestrated, heavily centralized. And but these 2 years in the Middle East with the UN, of course, that changed my point of view 180 degrees. So it was a great, I mean, overall, you know, I was really happy that I did it. And it was a very interesting time. And it really helped me, you know, just to find my direction again and to go in the right direction. Then I was also starting buying gold in 2004, of course, you know, as a consequence.
That's what's most interesting to me about this is the previous guest that I had on, Monaco 64. I asked him what keeps him sane during these times, and he said that I just keep in mind that this is right, that I know that this is right, and there's nothing that can convince me otherwise. And your story, having worked for the UN, you were basically pretty much vaccinated against you know, going too deeply into the bowels of the UN, because you had already started in your journey in reading truth and economics. So, but it just seems to me that some people, they join the globalist system, they get all the perks, the tax-free and whatever, all the nice little privileges they get, and then they fall for it hook, line, and sinker, and they just love the benefits. But some people, they have this discomfort with it, like you and I, and it just doesn't sit right. And but we don't, instead of turning away from that pain, we turn into it and try to ask, why is this, why don't I feel right with this? And then all of a sudden everything changes. And then even if your life gets more difficult, you're still more at peace with yourself. That's my impression. Is that kind of what happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was, you know, it took me some more years, you know, of course, to get really full on track. It was not easy, you know, to enter the gold business, of course, because it's a very small market. So it took me another 6-7 years until I was able to start a global gold company based out in Switzerland, which basically fulfilled all the necessary requirements that I thought, okay, now I really can stand 100% behind that solution. Because I always saw, you know, I understood back then already that gold and silver it's my insurance, it's my hedge, it's my pension fund. It's sound money for a sound society. You know, and if we have corrupted money, we always end up with a corrupted society, and that's where we are. And so since then, you know, I was just reading, and then of course, because I was always publishing, I started in 2011 writing my first articles. So it was always about, you know, philosophy, it was about the economy, it was about geopolitics, about history, monetary history, but also history as such. And I just became, you know, kind of, I was not complying any longer. And because I also realized, you know, when I was, you know, to think independently. I think, you know, most of the people who truly have a problem they cannot think independently any longer. And so I also had to retrain myself, you know, and really use my own mind independent of another person's guidance, based on knowledge, stuff that I was reading, and then also, you know, trying to understand, you know, connecting the dots. Because we all have been, you know, educated as kind of specialists, you know, so we understand this point and that point, but to really understand and connect the dots, to understand the big picture, that was not that easy. And so I think really all these books, all the conversations, and of course in the gold business, you are dealing with the crème de la crème of the people, to be honest. When I look at my customers and so on, I mean, they're all sound investors, you know, sound entrepreneurs. They all understand history. They all are capable of independent thinking. That's why they are also in gold and silver, you know, because it's something which is not very much in fashion. I mean, when we look at the current monetary, you know, when we look at all the total assets on this planet, which are worth something, I mean, then the gold and silver market and all the mining stocks and everything behind is what, 0.1%. So it's a clear niche. It's a clear niche. But I mean, you know, the people that you are meeting in that
business
are, you know, honestly, I mean, amazing individuals.
That
So
brings me
I was learning a lot from them as well. So
that brings me to a thought. that just occurred to me, right? We have this bifurcation in the gold and silver investment community between paper gold, gold ETFs, instruments, double leverage ETFs, whatever, this kind of derivative paper, futures, options, and then you have the physical stuff, right? I mean, there are, and the real hard money gold and silver bugs. Sometimes we use ETFs, but we know it's not the real thing, and sometimes we play their games with them, but it's like it's frowned upon. It's not really that. It's not great stuff. But what you just said, like when you're selling real hard money to people who understand, who have a depth of knowledge and an understanding of the world, even if they don't know that much information, they have a gut feeling about what realness is. They will go for the real stuff. They'll buy coins. Whereas the let's say the Keynesian fake money crowd that's into the inflation, they don't really understand what's going on. They're just part of a system that they're benefiting from, like Goldman Sachs or whatever these investment banks are. They'll be in charge of the futures and the ETFs and the paper gold and this and that, because they say, oh, it's an inflation hedge in times of uncertainty, but they don't see it as anything else than that. They just see when people get nervous, gold goes up, but they can't really tell you why, and they don't understand it. They can just show you charts and patterns and whatever. So I think that's really at the core of our uncomfortability with paper gold and paper silver derivatives, because it's not real. And when this stuff gets real, that stuff is going to go away. That's my feeling.
No, that's for sure. I mean, it's a fake world. I mean, whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we see on TV, mainstream press, the sociopaths, the intellectual idiots, the anointed experts, and all this crowd who believe that they are somehow chosen to tell other people what to do, what to think, what to eat, what to drink. I mean, it's all fake. And of course, when you look at the financial market and so on, I mean, it's a big bubble, it's a big illusion. It has been fueled by fiat money, which is, I mean, money is never an issue, especially not in a credit-based system, because you can just print it, It's always about goods and services. And that's basically what most of the people haven't understood. And when we look back at the last 20 months, of course, I mean, we are really, really down when it comes to goods and services. And at the same time, we have a huge injection in terms of money supply. I mean, we are in an experiment for the last 20 years already. But now the last 20 months have been just a crazy ride. And to me, I mean, everything is coming to an end. And all these paper illusions, these debt securities, all of them have a counterparty risk. And so I think, to me, it was always, gold and silver, that's something that I want to own. I'm not invested in it. I own it physically in coins and bars. And that's basically my pension. That's my insurance. That's the money for my kids. That's how I save. I mean, I never traded, I never sold gold when it was 1900 in 2011. I just kept it. The same goes for silver, and I just added always new. So I'm not a speculator in that sense. I mean, I'm really an owner and a simple guy. And of course, I mean, everything sometimes lasts longer than we can expect. But but I think now, I mean, we are, even now, 2021, 2022, I mean, you have the generational cycles, 80 years, you have the long-term debt cycles, which are already written down in the Torah, 50 years jubilee, debts are forgiven, all the slaves are freed.
Yes, I've noticed that myself. You want to know something interesting that I keep going back to, right? So I don't know if you know this, but we're in a Shemitah cycle. We're in the 7th year of the Jewish calendar of the debt this year. That's what it is, and it's been every seven debt cycles. You have the Jubilee cycle. We don't know which one that is, but it might be this year. It might not. We lost count of that a long time ago. But this year, 2022, is 50 years, 7 debt cycles from the final closure of the gold window in 1973, which was 7 cycles from the Weimar hyperinflation of 1923, which was 7 debt cycles away from the crime of 1873, when silver was demonetized initially in favor of a gold standard, which really hurt the middle class in favor of the rich. So we have these cycles of 50. And I don't put all my eggs in this numerology stuff. I just find it interesting. Just that you brought it up. It might be significant. It might not. It's just something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we don't know the future. We are humble. That's a big difference to all the rulers. We are not that humble at all. But so nobody knows the future, of course. But as I said, I mean, everything comes to an end. It's not possible that just can print money out of thin air, for decades. It has to stop. I mean, all these big empires. I mean, even the American empire. I mean, it's over. I think the British Empire was over before the American, and so on. I mean, empires go and come. And when we look at the past and all the the ancient Greeks or the ancient Egyptians and so on, I mean, it was always when the money has been debased completely, then basically also the empire collapsed, because corruption and all that power centralization was too big. So that's always the end of the story, and that's where we are. I think it can last a few months, it can last a few other more years. We don't know yet. But I think now, even the situation we are in, we have to take a decision. Anyway.
So how do you, given what we both know is coming, given what we all know is coming, given what most people who are going to watch this interview, what we know is coming, how do you maintain a calm, optimistic mind, knowing that there is some big uncertainty ahead in terms of how the world is going to react to this event? How do you keep it together without worrying too much to disturb your daily life? What keeps you together?
Well, on the one hand side, of course, I'm now self-responsible, independent for almost 5 years. So I basically segregated as much as possible from the current system as possible. So I'm my own boss. I don't have to, I'm not an obedient guy that I have to listen to this boss or that boss. So I'm really a free man. In addition to that, of course, all my wealth is basically outside the banking system. It's not in fiat or inflated stocks or bonds or all that crap. So really, I only hold hard assets. Okay, that's gold, silver, base metals. There is even great whiskey and cognac can make sense. I mean, just hard assets, which you can also consume in the future. And gold and silver, of course, has always been money for 5,000 years. Just because the people forgot about it for the last 50 years, that doesn't change anything. I think it will also be and remain gold and money in the future. So first of all, I'm independent. I have my flexibility, my liberty is also financially from that point of view. I'm independent. I don't care if the system goes down, because it's not going to affect me. And then, of course, I'm in Switzerland. Honestly, still the best nation you can be, or let's say the best cultural area that you can be, because Switzerland has been, based on the principles of subsidiarity, decentralization. We never had a president. We have 7 of these guys. So the decentralization of power was always something which is still within the DNA of the Swiss people. So I'm in a cultural environment where I don't see the social riots which you're going to see in France, Italy, Germany, Spain, all these parallel groups, this mass migration, which also has a lot of potential, to really just, when the system goes down, when the stores are empty, then you have the revolutions and the riots on the streets. And this is not the case yet. I think it's coming in the future. And so here in Switzerland, we are still a bit more homogeneous when it comes to the cultural and the values that we share. I mean, also we have, most likely we have 60% idiots, honestly, and 40% which see, for example, also the shot as a red line. They're not going to accept, a vaccine and so on. And I basically, in March last year, I introduced the idea of, I was saying, okay, the Corona, this is really, this is the official invitation to leave the system because they will lock us out anyway. And this is exactly what happened. And back then we started to promote an idea that we were saying, okay, let's get a bit off grid, let's get out of the big centers of the highly densely populated areas. We can leave it up to the guys who want to chill themselves. But the free individuals, the productive ones, the ones who want to steer their own ship and their own life and their own family and want to live in a free society with like-minded people, they really have to segregate, and they have to go a bit off grid, up in the mountain areas, into a nice municipality, and there we can prepare for what is coming. Because this is something, this is First World War, Second World War. We had people who basically survived it in a nice way because they were off grid, they were prepared, and I think that's what I'm doing this time. We cannot change the world. I still remain in Switzerland. I'm here, and I'm also fighting. I'm speaking up. I'm participating in demonstrations. I held speeches against barbarism at the end of the day, because it's a war against Western civilization. What we are witnessing right now, it's a war against self-responsibility. Man is born free. We are not a means to an end. Private property needs to be respected. We always have a choice, freedom of choice. Freedom of speech is extremely important for an enlightened society. That we can reason, that we can talk to each other without having the fear that we are being jailed away because we just shared the wrong opinion. This is all, this have been, the pillars of Western civilization, and they are now completely under threat by all these collectivists. It's really a war which is ongoing for decades already. This Corona is just a crowning in a long-term war. And I think people have to understand it, and the ones who understand it, they should start to prepare, but they also have to understand that they have to act. You just cannot talk about it. You also have to, you have to start the thinking process. Everyone has his own rhythm, but the thinking process is really, okay, what do I do? Am I at the right spot? Does it make sense that I'm in New York City, or in Baltimore, or in Paris, or in Frankfurt? Or does it make more sense that I go a little bit into the countryside and use now the time that we have, to really link up with like-minded people who share the same values?
Yeah. The riots are going to start in the big cities. That's pretty clear, and you want to be far away from those. And I remember reading. I got into a phase where I was in reading a lot about Mao's Great Famine and what happened in China in the 50s and 60s, and reading Frank Decoder there, and 45 million people starved to death basically in those 4 years, almost 10 times the size of the Holocaust in Germany. And then one thing struck me, like there was a few pages about people who went through that era fine. Why? Because they just, they had a hut in the woods somewhere in China, and they could just fish out of a pond, and they ate fish, and they gathered. They were like basically hunter-gatherer people, and this is how they lived. They barely even noticed anything was going on. I don't know if that to that extent it's possible today, but there are things that you can do to stay out of this war, because this, I think we're already in World War III in a sense. It's here. This is the fight, and some people want to fight it, but it might just be easier just to step aside and let the collapse happen, and then come out of your hole when they're done fighting, and pick up the pieces, because you're the one that'll have the capital to do it.
Yeah, because I think, to me, of course, what the sociopaths want, or the government authorities and so on, they really want to have a French Revolution 2.0. They really want that we're going to start killing each other, going after each other, divide and conquer. Still divide and conquer. It's fear and control. This is really the old recipe for totalitarianism, authoritarianism. And I think one of the biggest proofs for this is, this self-quarantine, self-isolation, human interaction becomes a medical threat. This is really destroying the horizontal relationships among individuals, between individuals, so that the people don't trust each other any longer. And so you have the dissidents and all these guys we know it from history. I mean, there is nothing new under the sun. You know, sometimes just the color is a bit different. You know, in the past it was brown or black, and now it's basically the melon fraction, you know, outside green, inside red, and the core it's brown. That's how I call the greenies and so on, with, because that's, I mean, that's the big agenda behind Corona, of course. You know, new Green Deal, Build Back Better, CO2 emission free, Greta Thunberg economy. I mean, it's, yeah, you know, it's a cultural revolution. What you basically were saying with Mao. I mean, this is the cultural revolution for the West, or at least it's an attempt. We will see if the guys will be successful or not. I mean, of course, I have my ups and downs. I had my first depression last year in April when I realized that they really go for lockdowns and everything, that they started the agenda and that they will go and remain on that path. And then in November, I was traveling all over the world, you know, for this Planet Lockdown movie. I mean, all over Europe, and so I'm never wearing. I don't wear a muzzle. You know, so I just go along. I do my shopping, and I did that in Italy everywhere. I was the only one without the muzzle, and I had no problems at all. But there, I just realized, okay, all the people are participating in it, and that was really then a kind of shock. But that was last year in November. And since then, basically, everything is fine. I have sometimes my ups and downs. But overall, I truly believe, you know, we will see much more radical decentralization in the future. I think the centralization it's over. We just have a transition period in front of us, which we basically have to make sure that we can survive it in the best possible way. But this might be, you know, pretty short. But I see, you know, resistance, I see segregation peaceful. I think that's also, I mean, it's a good message, you know, and really everyone can do whatever they want. But, you know, let us peacefully segregate the servants from the free individuals. Let the servants jail themselves, and the free, let them walk away. I mean, of course, these guys will realize that, you know, when the productive people are all leaving, and you only have politicians and bureaucrats, you know, some of the administration cronies, whatever. I mean, they might have they might have a problem. Anyway,
right, they're pushing us into an Ayn Randian gulch, basically, because we have nowhere else to go, because they're pushing us out. So let them push out. Let them push us out. It's hard to be pushed out, but in the end, I guess that's what had to happen, because we don't belong in this kind of society, and they're saying you don't belong in it, and we're saying okay, so we'll leave. Yeah. And that's it. Last thing, is there anything you want audience to know? Your website, your movie, I'll put the links in the description, but let us know where they can find you.
Well, I have my homepage. It's basically www.claudiogras.ch. So I also run a blog on there. So I write roughly 4 articles a month about all different kinds of topics. So great interviews with people I highly respect. Which have a sound mind, sound entrepreneurs, independent thinkers. So it's definitely not mainstream. So people can check it out. It's all for free. And then Planet Lockdown. Yeah, I mean, the movie is now coming. It will be released in the first days of the new year. And then we'll see. You know, if my name will. I mean, I already have been shadow listed, you know, on Google and so on. So I'm used to it. But we are also working on alternative platforms. Even there, you know, we need decentralized technology. Every coin has 2 sides, you know, so also the digital side, the digital coin has 2 sides. It has a centralized side with Facebook, you know, Google, and central banking digital coin and all that crap, which is basically enslaving humanity. And the other side of the coin is complete decentralization, which is also the nature of the internet. And I think now with cryptocurrencies, blockchain, I mean, we are heading in that direction as well. So I'm basically quite optimistic for the future. I mean, it's just getting on my nerves that we have to go through months and years, you know, being, you know, treated like sheeps, locked up like animals. And at the time, you know, I mean, you vaccine animals, you don't vaccine people against their will. This is just something that we basically have overcome a few hundred years in the Western world, but now we are back in barbarism. And so let's fight that.
Yeah. All right. Hope you enjoyed this interview. This is Rafi of the Endgame Investor. If you want to support me, you can sign up for a 2-week free trial of the Endgame Investor, and you'll see that link below along with Claudio's links. And have a good week, everybody, and have a good new year.